So, what if I told you that a highly decorated Special Forces commando and a serene Buddhist monk were the exact same person? It sounds impossible, right? But we're about to dive into the incredible story of a man who mastered two completely different worlds, one of action and force, and another of stillness and peace.
Okay, so check this out. On the left, you've got Fred Chong, a Special Forces commando, looking every bit the elite soldier. And on the right, that's Tenzin Drakam, a Buddhist monk. And yep, they're the same guy. It's really two chapters in one incredible life. One was a warrior trained to take on threats from the outside. The other became a spiritual warrior, learning to conquer the enemy on the inside.
So, this is the big question, right? How does a man go from storming a hijacked airplane to meditating in a cave in the Himalayas? That's the journey we're going to unpack today. So let's get into it.
All right, let's start with his first life, the soldier. And we're going to zoom in on one specific event that didn't just define his career. It put Singapore's elite forces on the world map.
And that takes us to Singapore Airlines Flight 117. On March 26, 1991, things went wrong. A flight that took off from Kuala Lumpur was hijacked. It was a crisis that was going to demand a perfect split-second response.
So the plane lands at Changi Airport, and for hours, negotiators tried to end it peacefully. But as you can see from the timeline, the situation just got worse and worse. By dawn, the hijackers were done talking. They threatened to start killing hostages. With lives on the line, the authorities had to make a choice.
30 seconds. Just think about that. That's how long the entire rescue operation took. From the moment the commandos blew the doors to the second all four hijackers were down and every hostage was safe. 30 seconds of absolute surgical precision.
And this quote from Fred Chong, who was actually on that assault team, man, it just says it all, doesn't it? There was no time to think, no time to hesitate. It was just years and years of training, all coming down to one single decisive moment.
This really makes you wonder, what kind of training creates soldiers who can pull something like that off under that kind of insane pressure? What is it that makes Special Forces, well, special?
Well, if you look at the military doctrine, it's not just about being tough. It's about this unique mix of being super adaptable, independent, and having incredible skills. I love this last point. You can't just mass-produce these guys. They're more like strategic assets than regular soldiers, and they're managed really carefully.
But Chung, he was always pushing himself further. In 1989, he went all the way to the US to take on one of the most brutal military courses in the world, the Navy SEAL training. We're talking about insane physical and mental torture. Out of 168 guys who started in his class, only 28 made it. And yeah, Chung was one of them.
So he earned the right to wear that coveted SEAL trident on his uniform. You know, he said on graduation day, he felt like the sun was shining just for him. But it wasn't just about him. For him, it was a symbol of his country's pride.
Okay, so this is where the story takes a huge turn. All that intense focus on defeating enemies on the battlefield, well, it eventually turned inward.
He actually put it perfectly himself. He said, "In the military, I destroyed the enemy outside. Now I destroy the enemy inside." I mean, wow. The mission was the same, but the battlefield just completely shifted from the physical world to the landscape of his own mind.
And you know, this wasn't some sudden, out-of-the-blue career change. Chong had actually been a practicing Buddhist since he was a teenager, getting up at 4 a.m. to pray before he even went to camp. So when he retired from the military in 2013, becoming a monk just felt right. It was the next logical step on his path.
And that iron discipline he learned as a soldier, it just transferred seamlessly into his spiritual life. I mean, just look at this daily schedule. The days once structured by missions and training were now structured by hours and hours of meditation. The external rigor was just traded for an internal one.
And his quest for enlightenment, wow, it took him to some of the most remote places you can imagine. He once trekked to a deserted cave way up in the Himalayas, a place you can only get to by helicopter and then a full day's hike, just to meditate alone for 3 weeks. Talk about trading the battlefield for total stillness.
But you know, this transformation didn't just happen overnight after he retired. Even while he was still a soldier, his focus had already started to shift. The warrior was already becoming a teacher.
For about 6 years, he was a commander at the Officer Cadet School, and he wasn't just going through the motions. He was deeply passionate about shaping the next generation of leaders, mentoring over 700 cadets. He wanted to turn them into leaders, not just soldiers. He was famous for this challenge he came up with. He'd lead his entire wing of cadets through 1,000 sit-ups in a row. But the point wasn't really the exercise. It was to prove to them that the real fight was in their heads. He wanted to show them that believing you can do something is often way harder than actually doing it.
So, when you look at these two incredible, seemingly opposite paths, the elite soldier and the dedicated monk, what's the one thing that ties it all together? What's the big takeaway from a life like this?
I think it's this. After everything he's done, he said his only regret was that he only had one life to give to his country. That powerful statement, it just shows you the one thing that's driven him through both of his lives, this deep, unwavering commitment to service.
And really, that's the final thought his story leaves you with. Whether it's protecting a nation from a hijacked plane or helping people find peace in a monastery, his journey really challenges our whole idea of what service means. It makes you ask yourself, what does it truly mean to dedicate your one life to serving others?